They tried to limit when I could use my own dock, said it needed to match HOA lake hours. Sent me warnings like they had any authority over it. What they didn't realize, the dock sits on land they lease from me. So I locked the gate and mailed them a lease renewal bill with new terms. No access without my written permission. Suddenly, their rules didn't matter so much. There's something about lakeside living that makes your soul exhale. When I bought the house, I wasn't just looking for square footage. I was looking for a kind of peace, the kind that comes with watching the sun scatter gold across the water, with loons calling out at dusk and the wind humming low through the trees. The house was modest, but it came with history, and more importantly, it came with access. Nestled on the quiet side of the lake, my new property included a path that led directly to a wooden dock. Nothing fancy, just weathered planks with a cleat at the end and a view that looked like it had never been touched. My realtor handed me the key like it was nothing special. "Old family dock," she said. "Lease shoreline. Transfers with the deed. Your grandfathered in." I nodded, not yet knowing how valuable that sentence was going to be. For months, life was simple. I spent early mornings fishing off the end of the dock with coffee in hand, and late afternoons watching my nephews jump in the water. There was a little sign nailed to a post nearby that read, "Private access, leaseholder only," and nobody ever questioned it. Until the HOA noticed. Now, I should mention, technically, I'm not in the HOA. My parcel lies just outside the formal boundary, though I share a road and a shoreline with a handful of their members. It's one of those old property lines that makes bureaucrats squint and neighbors grumble. At first, it was subtle. Someone replaced the weathered path sign with a shiny new one that read "Community Dock" for HOA members only. No warning, no discussion, just a sudden shift in tone. Then came the letter. A plain white envelope tucked into my screen door with the HOA logo stamped in bold. "Dear resident, please be advised that the dock located on Parcel 16B has been designated as shared community property by the Highwater Ridge Homeowners Association. Access is limited to dues-paying members of the HOA in good standing. Unauthorized use of the dock or storage of watercraft may result in a citation or revocation of access privileges. Regards, Sandra Litton, HOA Access Coordinator." It was absurd. The dock they were referring to was on land clearly marked on my deed, land that had been leased to the original property owner back in the 1980s. I remembered seeing the language. "Perpetual easement to private lessee with transfer of use contingent upon sale." Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it was a clerical error, a misreading of a faded map. So I replied. I drafted a short email, polite, firm, attached a PDF copy of my deed, and sent it to Sandra and the board. I explained that the dock sat on land that was not part of HOA common space, and that my family's lease rights were documented through the county. I even offered to meet in person and clear it up. No response. 2 weeks later, I got another letter. This one was less polite. It warned that my use of community property was being monitored, and that repeat violations could lead to fines or loss of boating privileges. The HOA claimed that my dock key was invalid and hinted that security might need to intervene. That's when the tension started humming. Because I hadn't signed up for this fight. I hadn't picked this battle. But I wasn't about to be pushed off my own shoreline by people who didn't even know what they legally owned. So I did what they clearly hadn't. I read the paperwork. I dug up my property records and pulled the full lease file from the county clerk's office. The leasehold ran from the water line to the edge of the path, a long, narrow strip of land officially leased to the original property owner, renewed twice over the decades, and now in my name as part of the deed transfer. The lease was valid, the easement was legal, and the dock was private. More than that, I discovered something interesting. The HOA, when it was formed, had annexed all parcels on the west and north sides of the lake, but not mine. Not the leasehold, not even the footpath. The lakefront was dotted with a mix of HOA common spaces and privately leased docks, and mine had always been one of the exceptions. I contacted the county again, just to be sure. A clerk named Miguel pulled the overlay and confirmed it. "Yeah," he said over the phone, "you're outside their jurisdiction. They can't touch that dock." And with that, I made a decision. No more waiting. No more politely reminding people to do their research. The next morning, I walked down to the dock with a toolbox, removed the HOA's members-only sign, and replaced it with a new one that read, "Private dock, leaseholder access only. Unauthorized entry will be reported." Then I changed the lock on the gate. The new key stayed in my pocket. By noon, I'd emailed the HOA board a formal notice titled Clarification of Dock Ownership and Access Rights. I included the lease documents, parcel maps, boundary overlays, and a polite summary. As of today, this dock is now secure by lock and will remain accessible only to those with legal right, namely, the leaseholder, me. Any attempt to restrict, enter, or alter the dock without my permission will be treated as trespassing under county code. I expected a reply. I expected a confrontation. What I didn't expect was the HOA president herself, Sandra Litton, to show up on my driveway the following afternoon, clipboard in hand, blazer pressed, lips pursed tighter than a drawstring. "I believe you've made a mistake," she said, not even offering a greeting. "No, irraplia, ibalieva e correctors." She launched into a speech, something about visual uniformity, how docks were historically shared, how you really should be contributing to the community. Her tone wavered between smug and patronizing. I let her talk, and when she finished, I simply handed her a copy of the lease. She read the first few lines, face going pale. "This is still valid?" I nodded. "Renewed in 2014. Auto-renews every 15 years unless I cancel." She cleared her throat. "Well, the board will need to review." "They're welcome to," I said. "But in the meantime, if anyone else tampers with that lock, I'll file a report." She left without another word. I stood at the edge of the dock that evening, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The lake was calm. The water lapped gently against the planks. And I realized something. They had no idea what I owned. But I did. And that made all the difference. When someone tries to take something that isn't theirs and then acts like they're doing you a favor, you don't respond with emotion. You respond with documentation. So while Sandra and her HOA army stewed over the new lock on the dock gate, I went full research mode. Because I knew I had the legal high ground, I just wanted to plant a flag so tall they'd never try climbing again. The first step? County lease records. The dock itself sat on a strip of land technically owned by the city, but made available decades ago through long-term recreational lease agreements. Back in the 80s, before the HOA even existed, the county offered shoreline parcels to homeowners for dock access, a quiet handshake between locals and the city planning office that became official through renewable contracts. I visited the county clerk's office in person. The receptionist, a woman named Carla who had clearly seen her share of land disputes, smiled when I gave her the parcel number. "You're not the first person to ask about this dock," she said, tapping away on her keyboard. "But you might be the first with the paperwork to prove you're right." She printed out a copy of the lease, stamped and recorded in 1984 under the name of the previous owner. At the bottom was a clause that caught my eye. "This lease shall remain valid, transferable to successive title holders, and subject to renewal every 15 years at the discretion of the lessee unless otherwise terminated." It was renewed in 1999 and again in 2014. And because I bought the property in 2021 and inherited all land rights, the lease was mine, active, and recognized. The document had everything: coordinates, the parcel overlay, the language about private use, and the explicit exclusion from HOA management. It wasn't just a permission slip, it was a sword. Next, I pulled the property tax rolls. Sure enough, the dock parcel, marked separately from the HOA's common space, was billed through my parcel ID. I was paying taxes on it. Not the HOA, not the board, me. At this point, I wanted one more layer of confirmation, not for me, but for whatever challenge came next. So I scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney who specialized in land use rights. Her name was Marissa Gray, and within 10 minutes of reviewing my folder, she looked up and said, "This is airtight. The HOA has zero legal authority over this dock. They're bluffing, or worse, they're knowingly misrepresenting their reach." She helped me draft a formal notice of leaseholder rights and HOA jurisdiction disclaimer. It was concise, full of citations, and mailed to the entire HOA board with a signature-required return receipt. Inside, it included a notarized copy of the county lease, a map overlay showing the lease parcel and HOA boundary, a copy of my title transfer confirming the lease rights, property tax statements showing my responsibility for the dock, a legal statement affirming that any further attempts to regulate, limit, or access the dock by unauthorized HOA personnel would constitute civil trespass. I also included a final paragraph, my favorite part. As of this correspondence, any signage, correspondence, or implied restriction of access by the HOA will be treated as fraudulent misrepresentation and met with formal response. If you would like to discuss dock access as a lessee to non-lessee matter, please be advised that any such agreement would require terms negotiated directly with me, not with the HOA. Translation: you messed with the wrong guy, and the clock's ticking on your nonsense. I didn't stop there. I posted a laminated version of the letter in a clear display case mounted to the dock gate, along with the county map and lease summary. No more guesswork. No more wiggle room. That weekend, things got weird. First, someone removed my private dock, leaseholder access only sign, and replaced it with an older community shared dock version. I checked the footage from the trail camera I'd mounted nearby, and, sure enough, it was two board members doing a little late-night sign swap. I sent them both a screenshot and a short email titled "Illegal Tampering of Private Property. Cease immediately." I copied the HOA's legal contact and the city attorney's general inbox. Then came the emails. A series of vague, "We'd like to resolve this amicably" notes. No acknowledgement of the lease. No apologies. Just, "We believe your use of the dock may conflict with our shared values." Their final mistake? Threatening to fine me. Per HOA compliance code, Sandra's last message read, "Continued use of the dock without board recognition may result in monthly penalties and revocation of lake privileges." I printed it, attached it to the complaint I filed with the county enforcement office. Because you can't fine someone over land you don't own. And you definitely can't threaten to revoke access that's protected by a signed, legally recognized lease. By midweek, I received confirmation that the county had opened an inquiry into the HOA's behavior, not just regarding me, but in other dock-related incidents. Apparently, I wasn't the first resident to be strong-armed, just the first to push back with receipts. The cherry on top? An email from the county commissioner's office. "Dear, your name. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention. Your lease is valid, and your documentation clearly outlines the legal limits of HOA jurisdiction. We are currently reviewing whether the HOA's signage and communications constitute regulatory overreach. Please continue to report any interference. Sincerely, Eric Langston, Office of Land Use and Shoreline Affairs." I printed that one too, and added it to the display case. By the end of the week, the HOA's tone had shifted. No more threats. No more fines. No more flyers claiming shared lake values. Instead, I received an invitation. The HOA board cordially invited me to an upcoming shoreline planning meeting to discuss future collaboration regarding dock use and community space. Translation: let's pretend we didn't try to steamroll you and start over. I politely declined. Instead, I attached a copy of my updated lease invoice, which included a line for trespass monitoring and administrative handling of unauthorized signage, marked payable to me should they attempt to enter again. Because sometimes the best way to educate someone who acts like they own the world is with a map, a lease, and a well-worded bill. There's a special kind of silence that follows a bluff being called. And when that bluff is backed by signatures, stamps, and a legally binding shoreline lease, well, that silence gets very awkward very fast. The moment I confirmed that the county had opened a formal inquiry into the HOA's behavior, the power dynamic shifted. The HOA board, which once flooded my mailbox with passive-aggressive notices and veiled threats, suddenly got very quiet. Too quiet. So I did what anyone with a thick file of evidence and a flair for irony would do. I sent them a bill. Yes, an actual printed invoice. Cream cardstock, black serif font, folded neatly into an envelope and hand-delivered to the HOA president's mailbox. The subject line? Invoice. Unauthorized use of privately leased shoreline and dock. Date range. January, present. Client, Highwater Ridge HOA. Leaseholder, my name. I itemized everything. Unlawful posting of unauthorized signage on lease property, $250. Interference with exclusive access, gate tampering, unauthorized entry, $350. Legal preparation and boundary enforcement materials, $425. Administrative oversight for compliance clarification, $175. Optional lease renewal to maintain visual access for HOA members, $1,500 per year. Total due, $2,700. Payable to my name, due, 15 days from receipt. And just for good measure, I added a footnote. Failure to remit payment may result in the complete revocation of any visual or footpath courtesy access. Please consult county records for jurisdiction confirmation. It was cheeky, it was legal, and it got their attention. 2 days later, I got an email with the subject line, request to discuss lease terms. No more all caps, no more veiled legal jargon, just a politely desperate attempt to put the toothpaste back in the tube. Sandra asked if I'd be willing to come to a resolution beneficial to all parties. I replied with one sentence. Sure, starting with back rent and a printed apology to every resident misled about dock ownership. That didn't go over well. The board tried to pivot. I received a message from their liaison, a man named Brad who wore mirrored sunglasses even on cloudy days. He said they were willing to consider a symbolic lease fee in exchange for shared access and a rebranding of the dock as community-friendly. I asked if he'd like to review the invoice again. He didn't reply. Instead, they called a special session of the HOA board. The agenda, dock access clarification and potential partnership. I didn't attend, but my neighbor Naomi did. According to her, it was less of a meeting and more of a slow-motion collapse. One board member pointed out that if I ever decided to fence off the dock path entirely, they'd lose not only access, but the illusion that they'd ever had it. Someone else suggested offering to buy the lease rights from me. Apparently, that idea was shot down when someone asked, what if he says no? Spoiler, I would have. But they weren't the only ones reassessing their assumptions. Something fascinating began happening around the neighborhood. People started talking. At first, it was casual, a wave here, a thumbs up there. But then came the real conversations. Wait, so that dock's not community property? You actually pay taxes on it. My realtor told me we all had equal access. That last one triggered a small avalanche. Turns out, more than a few neighbors have been told, by word of mouth, by implication, or outright, that the HOA controlled the entire shoreline, that the docks, walking trails, even the boat launch were all managed by the board. So when I posted a laminated copy of the lease and boundary overlay near the gate, now secured with a tamper-proof padlock, it wasn't just a legal flex, it was a public education moment. People stopped to read. Some took pictures. One man knocked on my door with his own plat map in hand, asking if I'd mind showing him how to get a copy of his lease record from the county. The more they learned, the more their trust in the board began to erode. And the more they talked, the more stories came out. Stories of other property misunderstandings, of fines for things that weren't in the bylaws, of threats disguised as recommendations. One woman admitted she'd stopped using her kayak because she was told the launch path was restricted unless she paid an access fee. I didn't need a campaign. The truth did it for me. By the end of the month, the HOA board had shifted from confident to careful. Their emails were now reviewed by legal before being sent. Their signage was cautiously phrased with disclaimers like "to the best of our knowledge" and "pending resident clarification." Sandra? She disappeared from the board entirely. Stepped down for personal reasons. But the rumor around the block was she couldn't handle the fact that her authority ended 14 feet short of the dock gate. My favorite part? The board eventually posted a new map at the clubhouse. It showed the actual HOA boundaries, complete with a shaded section that read, "Privately leased shoreline, not under HOA oversight." It was labeled with my parcel number. The irony was delicious. And the dock, it remained locked. I didn't restrict access entirely. If a neighbor asked kindly, I was happy to let them use it with permission, not through entitlement. not through assumed authority, through mutual respect, the way community is supposed to work. But the HOA? They never asked again. Because sometimes when someone tries to take what isn't theirs, you don't need to fight them. You just bill them for the attempt. It's funny how fast a narrative unravels once people see the truth for themselves. By the time the HOA called their emergency vote on shoreline jurisdiction, the tension had already shifted from who owns what to how did they think they could get away with this for so long. The board gathered under the banner of clarifying shoreline governance, but everyone in the room knew what it really was: damage control. They weren't there to clarify anything. They were trying to salvage their reputation. The vote wasn't even close. Nearly every resident present supported the adoption of an updated jurisdiction map, one created by the county, not the board, that definitively excluded the dock, the lease shoreline, and my parcel from HOA oversight. Someone even asked, why wasn't this done sooner? There wasn't a good answer. Sandra had already resigned by then, but two other board members who backed the enforcement letters stepped down shortly after. They didn't leave with speeches or thanks. They slipped out quietly, one by one, like players folding in a poker game. They finally realized they were losing. In their place, the community elected two new members, both longtime residents, both of whom had been quietly frustrated with the HOA's overreach for years. Their first order of business? Transparency. Their second? Restoring trust. Meanwhile, I stayed out of the politics. I didn't run for anything. I didn't grandstand or wave my lease around. Instead, I did something better. I hosted a dock party. Nothing big, just neighbors, kids, coolers, and folding chairs. I sent out simple invites. Join me at the shoreline this Saturday. Let's celebrate peaceful boundaries and good neighbors. The sign on the gate still read, "Private dock, leaseholder access," with a smaller one beneath. Today's access, welcome neighbors. People came, not just to swim or fish, but to talk, to ask questions, to shake my hand and say, I didn't know. I'm glad you stood your ground. One older couple brought lemonade and a thank you card. Another neighbor, the one who used to avoid eye contact, showed up with his teenage son and quietly said, appreciate what you did. Really, it wasn't about the dock anymore. It never really was. It was about boundaries, about truth, about someone finally standing up when most people just sighed and paid the fine. The dock, once just planks over water, became something more. A symbol, a reminder that rules mean nothing without rights, and that even the quietest homeowner has power when backed by law and patience. Now, when people walk the path by the shoreline, they point it out to guests. That's the dock, they say. The one the HOA tried to claim, and the one they had to give back. The new board, to their credit, embraced the reform. They created a clear boundary map for every resident. They updated their welcome packets to include a section titled Understanding Jurisdiction, and they posted a public note that read, we acknowledge past missteps regarding property governance. Moving forward, we are committed to transparency and respecting what is and isn't ours to manage. It wasn't just a win for me. It was a win for everyone who'd ever felt pushed around by a rulebook wielded like a weapon. As for me, I still drink my coffee on that dock, still fish at dawn, still watch the lake ripple in silence. But now, when I lock the gate behind me, it's not out of spite. It's just a gentle reminder. That peace is protected not by fences, but by facts. And that sometimes the quietest place in the neighborhood holds the loudest lesson. Sometimes the real property lines aren't drawn in the grass. They're buried in the lease agreement nobody bothered to read. The HOA thought they were blocking my dock, but I was the one holding the keys the whole time. They posted signs. They threatened fines. They tried to rewrite the rules with confidence instead of contracts. But when it came time to prove ownership, all they had was noise. And I had a notarized lease, a plat map, and county tax records on my side. Because when someone tries to restrict your access, you don't shout. You don't slam doors. You show them the paperwork, secure the gate, and if needed, you send them a bill. What started as a quiet attempt to control the shoreline ended with a lesson that spread across the whole neighborhood. You can't govern what you don't own. You can't manage what's not yours. And the moment you assume authority you don't legally have, someone with receipts, is going to teach you the hard way. Now, that dock stands as more than just wood and bolts over water. It's a symbol of how far some boards will go to control and how far one homeowner will go to push back. So now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to defend what was rightfully yours from HOA overreach or neighbor nonsense? Drop your story in the comments. Let's compare receipts, one boundary line at a time.